Ooh.
All right, Neil.
Can you repeat that for everybody?
The question is, we were talking earlier about scientific literacy and our approach towards science as a nation. In your opinion, and you serve on science advisory panels,
Yeah.
where do you think we need to go as a nation? What do we need to do to increase our scientific literacy?
I'll answer two-pronged. One is, what do you do with your kids? And kids need to be able to explore freely. And if you look at most households, they're not designed for that. They're designed to have the kid not explore. The kid comes into your kitchen and pulls out the pots and pans and starts banging on. What's the first thing you do as a parent? Stop that, you're getting the dishes dirty. Yet these are experiments in acoustics. That's what that is. Okay? Whatever the kid is doing, if it has the chance of breaking something, you're going to tell them to not do it, without thinking that that's the consequence of an experiment that they are conducting. And every time the kid wants to do something, provided it doesn't kill them, it's an experiment. Let it run its course, even if it makes something messy. You agreed to have a kid in the first place? Fine, clean up after them. And when it open up... Because it's those seeds of curiosity that is the foundation of what it is to become a scientist. Now, I don't want everybody to be a scientist. That'd be a boring world. I want the poets and I want the musicians and we need that. And I don't have a... But I'm talking about promoting science literacy. And so the first step for the parents is to get out of the way. Allow the child to explore. They start playing in the mud. Don't do that in the mud. I just cleaned those pants. You're getting in the way of another experiment. They start plucking the petals off the flowers you just bought from the florist. And you say, stop that, I just paid $10 for the flowers. Had you let that continue, they'd find in the middle the stamen and the pistil, and they'd learn something about the flower. For $10. That's cheap. Derek Bach, one-time president of Harvard, once said, if you think education is expensive, try the cost of ignorance. And so that's got to start at home. In the schools, I don't have a problem with the fact memorizing, but don't equate that with what it is to be wise or what it is to be smart. Smart should be some combination of that, yes, but also, what is your lens on the world? How do you figure things out? And you promote that by stimulating curiosity. And I don't see enough stimulated curiosity in this world. This is a famous school right here. I saw the banner in the opening corridors. So you probably don't have that problem here, right? But the whole world is not educated in this building. So a lot of change would need to happen in that regard. Now getting back to policy. I have tried. You do a simple Google, like YouTube and Tyson, my name, but put Neil so you don't get Mike. Dining on someone's ear. Half of what ends up thrown onto YouTube are talks I've given where I'm trying to convince people, not only the public, but lawmakers and people in power, that investing in the frontier of science, however remote it may seem in its relevance to what you're doing today, is a way of stockpiling the seed corns of future harvests of this nation. And those seed corns, what they do is, whether or not you know it today, advancing a frontier, history has shown, has advanced a culture ever since the Industrial Revolution got underway. And we can speak more hegemonistically about it, that anyone who has embraced the powers of technology has enjoyed economic wealth, the likes of which the world has never seen, attendant with strength of security. Okay? And so people say today, they'll say, suppose the next terrorist attack is like a chemical attack. Do you call out the Marines, or do you get your best chemists to figure out what to do about that? There's a point where your weapons are not as useful as the brain of the scientist who you could bring to bear on the problem. And so I see science and technology and creative investments in it as the most significant infusion to our economy that could possibly be conceived. The problem is it's not going to boost the economy next quarter. It's got a time horizon longer than most people have the patience for, and most politicians have the re-election cycle to be tolerant of. So what we need is a longer view on those investments. I don't want to have NASA going hand in hand trying to get money to stimulate the frontier of cosmic discovery. And that frontier now involves biologists in the search for life, chemists in understanding the soils of Mars, aerospace engineers. You know what I don't want to do? I don't want to stand in front of 8th graders and say, who wants to be an aerospace engineer so that you can design an airplane that's 15% more fuel efficient than the one your father flew? That's not going to get him. But if I say, who wants to be an engineer and design the airfoil that'll fly in the rarefied atmosphere of Mars, I'm going to get the best students in the class, and you know it, because that's an exciting project for smart people to work on, motivated people to work on. And when you have them, they invent stuff, they discover things, they transform the culture in which we live on a time horizon that is not easy to just tell someone in a one-sentence soundbite. And what I want is a level of science and cultural literacy that will allow the public to be able to think beyond the election cycle, to think for themselves and say, this is a good investment. How many times have you heard people say, if you're not among us here, why are we spending money up there when we have the problems down here? Have you ever asked how much money we're spending up there? Ask that question. You know what the answer is? I've asked people, how much money do you think we're spending? Here's your tax dollar. How much do you think? 10%? 15%? Those are the kinds of answers I get. You know how much is getting spent? The rovers, the space station, the space shuttles, all the launch vehicles, all the NASA centers is 0.6 of 1 penny on your tax dollar. 0.6 of 1 penny pays for it all. And you're telling me, why are we spending money there and down here? If you need that money to solve these problems, you got some other problems going on. Okay? That's a whole other problem with society. So, I'm sorry, I'm getting off. So my point is, I think the greatest the greatest need is to be able to have the foresight necessary to make investments on the frontier of science, even if at the time you make those investments, you cannot figure out how that might make you rich tomorrow. Michael Faraday, in the 1840s, was the first one to pass a wire through a magnetic field. And it made a little meter tick it moved a meter. He hooked up to it. Now this guy, you do this and this happens. That's kind of cool. If you're nerdy, to a nerd, that's a cool thing, right? You do this and this happens. And so what was happening is, it induced a current through the wire. He showed his colleagues. It looked like just kind of a curiosity, a toy. Showed it to Parliament. They say, why, this is what we're funding? We're funding this toy? And this may be apocryphal, but it is said of Faraday, in response to this inquiry, said this, because they asked, well, what value is this to the British Empire and to the king? He said, I don't know what value it is today, but I know one day you're going to tax it. And in fact, that is the foundation of how all electricity is made today. And it would take another 60 years before electricity would come to homes. But who could have known it at the time?
I have a hypothesis. I didn't do the experiment, but it's not good enough to only be smart at something or to score high on an exam. At some point, you have to step away from the exam and say, I have a new thought that no one has had before. And it's not a thought that you told me to regurgitate on this exam that you just wrote, because it's a thought that no one has had before. And how do you get those thoughts? You get those in irreverent cultures. Possibly that has delayed our collapse because it is out of the environment of not regurgitating what someone else has learned in their lifetime that allows you to make a discovery that no one else has made before.
You think there are too many tests? We give kids too many tests?
I think we put too much emphasis on what the meaning of the test is. I test people. It's a way to find out what you know. But don't then say, if you don't know this, therefore the rest of your life is screwed. No, because go find people who are successful in this world. Find, talk show hosts and comedians and novelists and attorneys, and go get the politicians. Put them in a room and say, how many here got straight A's throughout school? None of them are going to raise their hands. By the way, throw in inventors. Throw in all these people. None of them are going to raise their hand. Okay? So Bill Gates dropped out of college. Michael Dell dropped out of college. those people are not, the success of those people is not measured by how they performed on the exam that you wrote as professor. Because they're thinking in ways that you have yet to think, because they're inventing tomorrow. And the only way you can invent tomorrow is if you break out of the enclosure that the school system has provided for you by the exams written by people who are trained in another generation. The goal here is not to make everybody a scientist. That's not the goal. What a boring world that would be. You want artists, you want musicians, you want novelists, poets, comedians, actors. You want the rest of this. What matters is whether they're scientifically literate and maintain that literacy and that curiosity throughout their lives, in no matter what becomes their profession. Kids are born scientists. You don't have to turn them on to investigating the world around them. They do that coming out of the womb. Kids turn over rocks and poke at the millipedes. They pick apart flowers. They bang on pots and pans. They will do things that are experiments in the world around them. And so the challenge is not getting kids interested in exploring the world around them. The challenge is staying out of their way. That's the challenge for the adult. How many parents do you know, when the kid drags the pots and pans out of the cabinet, how many of them say, stop doing that, you're making a racket and you're getting the dishes and pots dirty, put them back. They just squashed an entire experiment in acoustics.
Right.
I think front and center is, what do you do with information that's handed to you? How do you react to it? What does it mean to you when somebody says, I have these crystals, if you rub them, you'll get better. It'll cure your ailments. How do you react to that information? Is the first thing, really? Oh, I'll try it. Or, how does that work? See, what's the first question you ask of the person who tells you this? And the question you ask is part of what science literacy is about. It's what level of skepticism is almost a dirty word. Let me say, what level of inquiry do you bring to statements that others make to you? I'll give you an example. I'm training my children, age 8 and 12, to be scientifically literate. For example, my daughter, when she was 11, I saw a picture of Hannah Montana, a poster on a wall, and I went back and told her, I said, I just saw a picture of Hannah Montana. It was on a poster. It was huge. It was the size of a wall. I told her this. First, I wanted to impress her that I knew who Hannah Montana was. Anyone 11 years old, any girl 11 knows who Hannah Montana is. So that was my first effort. But part of that was to tell her that it's a pop star and there's a huge poster. My daughter's next question to me was, how big was the wall? I said, it's huge, as big as a wall, but walls can be different sizes. So she did not have enough information to react to what I told her. So she came back for more information. I submit to you that that's science, that's a manifestation of science literacy. It's not how much science can you recite. It's not, well, that's an aspect of it. It's not, can you give the details of how your microwave oven works. That's an aspect of it, but that's not the most important feature. Most important feature is the analysis of information that comes your way. And that's what I don't see enough of in this world. There's a level of gullibility that leaves people susceptible to being taken advantage of. I see science literacy as a kind of a vaccine against charlatans who would try to exploit your ignorance. Why is it that you have this uncountable number of web pages given unto the apocalypse in the year 2012? And you look them up and you see what they say, and it says, Earth, the sun, the center of the galaxy will come into perfect alignment on December 21st, 2012, and the extra gravity is going to knock Earth off its axis, and it'll be the end of the world as we know it. So, do you just believe that? Or do you ask questions about it? Your next question should be, how often does Earth, the sun, and the center of the galaxy align? That really should be your next question. The answer to that is, it aligns every year on December 21st. So the statements that the world is going to end in 2012 because of that alignment are patently false. Otherwise, we would have ended a long time ago on some previous December 21st, and that hasn't happened. So if you're not equipped to even know what next question to ask, I'm not requiring that you can calculate the force of gravity. I'm not requiring that you studied Newton's laws. I'm requiring that you know how to ask questions, to inquire about the flow of information that's ready to enter your head and affect what kind of decisions you'll make about your own life. Why is it that every newspaper article that describes an eclipse says rare eclipse in China? Rare? Eclipses happen every 2.5 years. Were you paying attention the last time? Apparently not. You don't say rare Olympics coming up. And Olympics are rarer than solar eclipses. So in the end, it comes down to how plugged in are you?
Volition, right? Nobody dragged you, I don't think, kicking and screaming. What I have found is that science literacy empowers you to know when someone else is just basically full of it. Because you understand full of wrong information would be the rest of that sentence. It means wrong information, incorrect information. And so if you understand how the world works and what the limitations are that are well determined scientifically, experimentally, then you can judge whether someone is trying to exploit your scientific ignorance. And the person exploiting you is not necessarily scientifically literate themselves. For example, they might have crystals that they want to sell you, and they will claim that it will cure you of your ailments. Like I said earlier, I don't require that in advance you understand the geological crystalline structure of quartz. I won't require that of you. What I will like for you to have is a way to ask questions about that. So they say, I've got some crystals. Is your first statement, great, how much do they cost? I'll buy some now. Is that your first thought? Or is it, how do they work? Why do they work? Where do you get them? How have you tested them? What kinds of ailments does it cure? Is it better for some ailments than others? Can you cure something for me right now? And by the time you're done, the person is in tears looking to find someone else to sell their crystals to. Because in fact, they don't have the science literacy enough themselves to back that up. Now, we as a species are particularly susceptible to self-delusion. So eyewitness testimony is basically the worst form of evidence you could possibly bring forth. Odd, because it's some of the highest form of evidence in the court of law, which leaves me deeply worried about the future of our legal system. Because if you come to a science lab and said, it happened this way, I swear to you I saw it, it's like, get out of my lab. I don't need this. What did you drink this morning? Or were you awake when you made the measurements? Give me a chart recorder. Give me some other device that is independent of your emotional state. It doesn't require that you had your cup of coffee in the morning to get the proper data. Then we can start the conversation about whether your phenomena that you measured is correct. So science literacy empowers you. It inoculates you against charlatanism. But more important than that, in a free society that we tell ourselves is a capitalist society, and we are blocks from Wall Street, which is the symbol of capitalism, the greatest symbol of capitalism there ever was. In a capitalist society, those in the know that yes, one way to make money is to trade money, but at some point somebody's got to actually make stuff to sell. Somewhere in there you got to be making something. Who makes things? Who invents things? What are the engines of tomorrow's economies? What we've known since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution is that innovations in science and technology and investments in those innovations enable nations to rise to economic power such as the strength of which they have never seen before. So that the extent to which we eschew, good SAT word there, eschew, the extent to which we disassociate, the extent to which we denigrate or presume it is of no relevance to us, the innovations of science, engineering, technology, and mathematics, that is the unraveling of the technological society that we've come to know and love, that was built on the sweat equity of the generation that came before us, who understood the value of those investments. And so what would happen is America would fade to insignificance on the world stage, which is a state of presence that we are unaccustomed to occupying. Now, it's your choice. In an elective society, you vote in congressmen and senators and the president. We choose the future. We're not run under dictatorships. So all I can do is alert